Coming up, Tyler Herro's huge fourth quarter wins it for the Heat, and the Cavs take down the Celtics again. This is Locked On, Game to Game NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On NBA on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. We are here ready to recap all of the action for you from last night in the NBA. The Celtics lost to the Cavs in overtime. And if that sounds familiar, it's because the same thing happened just a couple of days ago. Locked On Celtics tells you what it was like having to relive that loss for a second time.
Celtics had their chances, but couldn't capitalize in another overtime loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm John Corrales of the Locked On Celtics podcast, and Jaylen Brown had a decent look in overtime. It didn't fall. That's a shot that he can probably hit plenty. Jason Tatum had the dunk to force overtime, which was awesome, but the Celtics had too many defensive breakdowns. And yeah, Donovan Mitchell went off at the end of the fourth quarter, but it looked like the Celtics were going to continue the trend of each team taking turns dominating a quarter. Cleveland had the first and third. Celtics had the second and the fourth for about 8 minutes of it. And then they just allowed too many dribble penetration, too many drives, too many cuts. And that's just something that has been burning the Celtics. They're not quite as good defensively as they were, especially without Robert Williams. It's going to be what I'm talking about on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
The Washington Wizards able to win in Philly last night. That brought Washington back to 500 while sending the Sixers below 500 on the season. Locked On Wizards tells you how Washington pulled off that upset.
This is Brandon Scott again from Locked On Wizards. The Wizards tonight won 121-111 in Philadelphia against the 76ers and thus snapping a 3-game losing streak. With a combined 60 points, Bradley Beal and Kristaps Porzingis both led the charge to beat a 76ers team that, yes, they were without Joel Embiid, but still had Tyrese Maxey, James Harden, and Tobias Harris. Now, the keys to the Wizards' victory tonight was improved ball movement and a lack of ISO plays, so more fluidity on the offensive end, and better defense. Now, while the defense was better tonight, transition defense continues to be an issue for the Wizards. So going forward, the Wizards do play the Brooklyn Nets on Friday night. So defense should be the forte against a fluid Brooklyn Nets offense. So everybody have a good night, and thank you for watching.
The Heat got a huge fourth quarter from Tyler Herro. They used it to close the door on the Sacramento Kings. Locked On Heat has everything you need to know from the first back-to-back wins of Miami's season.
A Tyler Herro game winner gives the Miami Heat their first 2-game win streak of the season. I'm Wes Goldberg with Locked On Heat, and after the Miami Heat trailed for most of the fourth quarter, Tyler Herro scored 13 points in that period, including the game-winning three-pointer with 1.8 seconds left to give the Heat the win. And after Tuesday's win over the Warriors, the Heat have won consecutive games for the first time all season to improve to 4-5. It's a big win for the Heat, who were without Jimmy Butler tonight. He was resting a sore hip. And a lot of it has to do with Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo combining for 21 of Miami's 33 points in the fourth quarter on the second night of a back-to-back. Thanks to them and 22 points from Kyle Lowry, the Heat might be turning things around. For more on the game and the Heat's outlook going forward, tune in to Locked On Heat on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
The Charlotte Hornets have a ton of players out right now, and no surprise, they lost big in Chicago as a result. Our Locked On Hornets host has the recap of that blowout in Chicago.
The Charlotte Hornets are running short on starters. They're running low on offense, and ultimately they got ran out of the building in Chicago. I'm Doug Branson from the Locked On Hornets podcast. The Hornets lose this one 106-88. They lose Gordon Hayward in the second half, or really the second quarter. He did not play in the second half due to a shoulder injury. They've been running a majority of the offense through him, and you could definitely tell the difference in that second half for the Hornets, who are missing LaMelo Ball, their only all-star, Terry Rozier, one of their best three-point shooters, and Cody Martin, one of their better wing defenders, especially off the bench. The bench has been carrying the Charlotte Hornets as of late, but it seems they are regressing to the mean as they're having to reach deeper and deeper into that bench, and the Bulls bench coming up big time with three-point shot after three-point shot. The Hornets will look to regroup as they travel to Memphis and try to stave off a losing streak.
The Rockets played the Clippers twice in a row this week, and that meant 2 losses for Houston. Last night, it was an 8-point defeat at home. Locked On Rockets explains how LA got the best of Houston.
The Houston Rockets unable to get revenge on the LA Clippers, dropping their second straight game to them back here in Houston. What's up? This is Jackson Gatlin from Locked On Rockets. Despite a huge night from Alperen Sengun and some big games as well from Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr., the Rockets were unable to get their revenge on the LA Clippers. Some costly mistakes late in this game. The Rockets had a chance to cut it to 4 with just under a minute to go. Usman Garuba, unable to handle a pass from KJ Martin, goes sailing out of bounds. The Rockets were very much in this game down to the wire despite some ugly fourth quarter mistakes. The silver linings for the Rockets in this game, though, Alperen Sengun had a huge night, looked very much like it was intentional, all of the touches he was getting in the Rockets offense, and Jalen Green breaking out of his shooting slump in the best way in this game. We're going to break it all down for you right over at Locked On Rockets.
Coming up, the Raptors blow out the Spurs, and the Lakers and Pelicans needed overtime in LA. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Game to Game is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's super simple. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against anybody. You're just competing against the projections, and it's super simple to do. And of course, just takes a couple of minutes to make those choices. Download the Prize Pick app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Milwaukee Bucks barely beat the Pistons earlier this week, but reminded Detroit and everybody else just how good they are on Wednesday. The host of Locked On Bucks and Pistons check in with us after the game.
1971, 72, 2018, 19, and 2022, 23. The 3 times the Bucks have started an NBA regular season 7-0. The previous 2 times they went on to win 60-plus games. My name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. Another night, another brilliant performance from Giannis Antetokounmpo. He finishes with 32 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, 5 steals. He chucked in a couple of blocks for good measure as well. 6 straight games with 30-plus points. That equals a career-high mark from back in 2019. So the Bucks will be going for a franchise record in wins to start the season. Giannis will be going for his own personal record of 30-plus games the next time the Bucks are out. The offense is continuing to have some struggles. The shooting not great. Giannis is doing brilliant things there, but the defense of this team is elite. No Middleton, no Connaughton, no Ingles, no worries for the Bucks so far in season 23. Make sure you check out the Locked On Bucks podcast wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. We have a fair bit of fun there, and we want you to join us.
Well, I can't say I did not see this one coming. Host of the Locked On Pistons podcast, Kook Hill here. The Pistons lose by 25 tonight to the Milwaukee Bucks, 116-91. It felt like from the get-go, the Milwaukee Bucks kind of felt disrespected that the Pistons kept it as close of a game as they did just a few days ago when they lost by just 2 points to the Milwaukee Bucks. And Giannis from the get-go was like, yeah, that's not going to happen tonight. We're going to probably blow you guys off the court. And you could feel that kind of energy from the beginning of the game. Kay Cunningham struggled tonight. The entire team really struggled tonight. And Bojan, I think, had his first off night for the Pistons after shooting like Jesus himself throughout the beginning of the season. And once he started missing, it was basically over with. He was really what was keeping them in there. When he starts missing, it's just going to be over with for the Pistons. So, tough game tonight for the Detroit Pistons. Giannis goes crazy on them, but that's a championship team over there. You can't really be too mad about it. I saw it coming, to be honest, but we'll talk more about it on tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
Greg Popovich was pretty honest with fans in the preseason, saying that you probably don't want to bet on the Spurs this season. Last night gave them a really good reason why that is. The Raptors dominated in every way, and Locked On Raptors recaps what will likely end up as one of the largest wins in the NBA season.
I mean, the Spurs never even had a chance. Sean Woodley here from Locked On Raptors to break down the Toronto Raptors' 143-100 blowout win over the San Antonio Spurs, who, in fairness, were missing their two best players in Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, but still, the Raptors looked pretty awesome in this dissection of the Spurs. Their fast break offense was unbelievable. Pascal Siakam, 22 points, 10 rebounds, 11 assists for his second triple-double in 8 games as he continues to be fantastic to start the year. OG Anunoby came into this game leading the NBA in steals per game and had 5 more to go along with the 6 he had on Monday against Atlanta. This Raptors team is finally through a really difficult stretch of their schedule to start the year. They've got some easier games coming up. They got Otto Porter Jr. back for his first game as a Raptor tonight, and Fred VanVleet's missed the last 2 with injury, but should be back soon as well. This Raptors team is primed for a run. I'll have it all broken down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Raptors. Be sure to tune in.
The Utah Jazz have started off this season on a hot streak thanks in part to great shooting from behind the arc. But on Wednesday, our Locked On Jazz host saw Utah go cold from 3 at the worst possible time in a 3-point loss.
The Utah Jazz fall in Dallas 103-100 as the 3-ball goes absent for quarters at a time. Hi, it's David Locke of Locked On Jazz. A 103-100 final tonight as the Jazz fall to 6-3. Jazz led most of the way by as many as 15 at one point, but Dallas outscored the Jazz 29-22 in the fourth quarter and 24-15 in the second quarter. And in both of those quarters, the Jazz did not make a 3-point shot. Jazz have been the 3rd most frequent shooting 3-point shooting team. It's a large part of what they have done under head coach Will Hardy. But in the second quarter, they went 0 for 7, and in the fourth quarter, they went 0 for 4. A Dallas amoeba zone caused the Jazz a bunch of problems in this one. They did get 22 from Jordan Clarkson and 19 off the bench from Colin Sexton, but Luka Doncic 33 and a inspired defensive effort was too much. Jazz fall to 6-3. Next stop is Los Angeles for the Jazz.
Dallas Mavericks get a clutch win from some second half great play. Nick Angstead from the Locked On Mavericks podcast here, and Luka Doncic, another 30-point game, 33 points, 11 assists. He just continues to be incredible from the mid-range, from the post, from the restricted area. He's just been incredible inside of about 12 feet. He hits everything. He can take anybody off the dribble right now. Spencer Dinwiddie, one thing we really wanted to see from Spencer Dinwiddie going into this game was being aggressive, especially being aggressive early in the fourth quarter, and he was that. 20 points, 5 assists, 4 steals for Spencer Dinwiddie. An incredible night from him to just step up, to be able to take over the offense when they needed him to, and to really take his role in this offense. And Christian Wood, 21 points, 10 boards after a really bad first half from him. He steps up in the second half, takes advantage of the mismatches he could get against this Jazz team, and was able to have a really, really good outing. We'll talk about this and more on tonight's Locked On Mavs.
The Lakers trailed by 3 with just seconds to play, but the worst 3-point shooting team in the league forced overtime at the last second and then won it there. Locked On Lakers tells you how LA picked up win number 2 of the season.
This is Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of the Locked On Lakers podcast, and the Lakers pull out a 120-117 overtime win over the New Orleans Pelicans, and despite 28 points from Lonnie Walker, 20 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 blocks from Anthony Davis, and 13 points, 9 assists from Russell Westbrook off the bench, the hero of the game was Matt Ryan. Yes, G League Matty Ice, who hit the buzzer-beating, overtime-pushing three-pointer that got the game into the extra 5 minutes, where the Lakers were eventually able to pull ahead. To be honest, they shouldn't have required overtime in the first place because the Lakers had a 16-point lead in the third quarter. But given everything the Lakers have been through up to this point and the things they're still looking to figure out, I think it actually is in some respects a positive that they managed to find the resolve to win the game, even if it wasn't pretty. A lot more to get into, so make sure that you are subscribing to Locked On Lakers YouTube channel and that you make Locked On Lakers your first listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Pelicans led by as much as 16 points early in LA, but they couldn't close the door. Locked On Pelicans tells you how it all went down.
The Pelicans snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Despite sloppy basketball from both teams, the Pels had this one locked up. Up 3 with 1.8 seconds left, rookie Dyson Daniels was at the line shooting 2, and then he had his welcome to the NBA moment. He missed both, just a rough moment for a rookie who had a chance to ice the game. And then the Pelicans had another defensive breakdown when they tried to defend backdoor cuts to the rim instead of the perimeter, when the Lakers had to make a 3 to tie. And oh yeah, they did. And it went to overtime. It was a night of mistakes from the Pelicans, whether it was the 10 turnovers in the first half, blowing a 5-on-3 fast break that ended up with an airballed layup in overtime, or failing to box out and letting the Lakers get 16 second chance points. It was a winnable game that went to overtime, and head coach Willie Green said it best. The Pelicans didn't deserve to win. They need to shake this one off quickly with a tough back-to-back coming up against the Warriors and the Hawks this weekend.
That's all for today on Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On NBA and your team's Locked On podcast, both on YouTube and wherever else to get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.